Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. The sun climbed over the ridgelines of Nuristan Valley, bringing a hard light that settled on rock, dust, and the narrow road curling between steep slopes. Sergeant Ava Mitchell sat in the middle Humvee with her med pack strapped across her chest, the buckles tight, the contents arranged the same way she always kept them. Gauze on top. Tourniquets stacked. Needles and meds tucked where her hand would find them without looking. She checked each item with a quick press, then looked out the window again. No kids on the footpaths. No goats. No wood smoke curling from the stone houses on the hillside. The quiet was the kind that made your skin notice it. Captain Ryan Mercer was up front, one hand on the dash, scanning the ridges beyond the windshield. He didn't talk much when the valley felt wrong. He lifted 2 fingers to signal a crawl. The convoy slowed. In Ava's truck, Cole Bennett tried a joke under his breath and forced a grin he didn't feel. Marcus Heller gave him a look that said save it. Ava kept her breathing steady and let their voices drift. She watched the slopes the way she'd been taught, then the way she'd learned over time, first for obvious shapes, then for the smaller things, a shine that didn't belong, dust that moved against the wind, lines that cut across rock where there shouldn't be lines. She had done this road before. She had patched men on this road. She had ridden back to the forward operating base with blood on her sleeves and gone straight to inventory because the next patrol would need a bag ready. People sometimes called her quiet. She wasn't trying to be. She just spent energy where it mattered, and in places like this, words were a cost. Short halt, Mercer said on the net. The trucks rolled to a stop. Tires pressed gravel. The valley breathed dust. Ava popped her door, slid down, and crouched by a low wall of broken stone. She listened to the valley. The wind hissed in the brush. A crow called once and then nothing. Her pulse stayed steady. She let the quiet tell her what it was hiding. Heller jogged up, checked the ridge with his optics, and passed them to her. See anything? Not yet, she said. She tracked the line of rock and scrub, held on a notch in the slope, then returned the glass. Feels off. Bennett adjusted his helmet, eyes darting. Ma'am, is it always like this? No, Ava said. Sometimes it's louder. She didn't smile. She pointed. Stay low. Watch that cut. Mercer stepped from the lead truck, studied the ground ahead, and raised his hand again to hold. He looked back at Ava for a beat. He didn't need to speak. She nodded once. She slung the med pack forward so it sat high on her chest. The straps bit into her shoulders in a way that meant the weight was exactly where she wanted it. They reformed as a staggered line along the road edge, shapes breaking the outline against rock. The plan was simple: slow drive through the pinch, eyes on the high ground, cross the narrow bend, clear the village ruins, and keep moving to the next checkpoint. Simple plans were the ones that worked if everyone kept their part of it and if the ground didn't argue. Ava ran through contingencies in her head. Blast front from the left or right. Small arms from high angle. First priority, bleeding control. Second, airway. Third, move the wounded out of the funnel. If contact came hard, she would drag first and think about weight later. Mercer would call sectors. Heller would anchor. Bennett would be okay if someone gave him a job. She marked where cover existed and where it pretended to exist. Mount up, Mercer said. Doors slammed. Engines turned over like the sound might chase fear away. The column rolled. Ava kept her eyes on the glass, then past it, counting breaths so the shakes never came. She pressed her glove against the top flap of the med pack one more time and felt the click of the zipper head tapped into its parking spot. Her world like small checks. Small checks built bigger ones. The bend came up with its blind wall of stone on the right and a drop to a dry streambed on the left. Bennett's jokes were gone. Heller's jaw set. Mercer lowered his chin, and the lead truck's antenna whipped at the empty air. A gust pushed dust across the hood and then cleared. In the open space that followed, the whole valley felt like it paused on purpose. Ava found her voice and used it the same way she used a tourniquet, firm, clear, no panic. Heads on a swivel. Watch the shelf on the high side. She kept looking. She kept listening. She didn't know it yet, but this was the last clean breath before the road showed its teeth. A white flash ripped from the high side and slammed into the lead Humvee. The blast punched the air out of the valley and through gravel like knives. Ava felt the truck lift, then drop. Her door blew open and she hit the ground on a knee, ears ringing. She didn't wait for the sound to come back. She moved. Smoke rolled across the bend. Mercer stumbled out of the first truck, one hand on his chest, the other waving people to cover. A crack from the ridge followed by three more, sniper glass, then rifles. Heller yelled, "Contact right," and started returning fire, short, mean bursts that cut the dust. Ava slid behind the low wall she'd marked and pulled her med pack forward. "Bennett, with me," she said, and he crawled on elbows, eyes wide but focused. She pointed. "You pull. I work." They surged to the nearest downed soldier, boots slipping on gravel. Blood soaked through a sleeve, arterial. Ava clamped a tourniquet high and twisted until the pulsing stopped, then rolled the man onto his side to clear the airway. "You're good. Stay with me," she said, not looking at his face, already scanning for the next red. More fire chewed the road. The enemy had the angles. High shots pinned the convoy, lower shots tried to herd them into the open. Ava marked the pattern without thinking. One shooter on the shelf. Another by the notch. A third trading position off the ruined wall above the bend. "Heller, shelf 2 o'clock, she called. He shifted and hammered the edge until the glint vanished. Mercer took 2 steps and collapsed behind a tire. Ava saw the way his hand pressed, saw the bloom at his ribs. She sprinted. Rounds snapped past like hornets. She hit the ground next to him and tore open his plate carrier. The wound was ugly but breathing still moved his chest. She vented the seal and stuck it down fast, then pressed her palm into the bleed and felt the stickiness settle. "Captain, don't talk," she said. He tried anyway. "Hold the corner, keep them off he managed. "I've got you," she said, already reaching for gauze. "Bennett, smoke right now." Bennett fumbled a canister, yanked the ring, and threw. Gray billowed and gave them a thin wall to vanish behind. The smoke made the valley smaller. It also made the enemy guess. That was enough. Ava dragged Mercer by his carrier strap to the thicker part of the wall and propped him into a seated lean, feet flat, head up. "Slow breaths," she said, counting with him. She keyed her radio. "Hawthorne, this is Mitchell. We're in a kill box at the blind bend. 1 urgent surgical, multiple wounded. Need birds on standby." Static, then Grace's voice, tight and calm. "Copy, Mitchell. Mark LZ when you can. Get me grid." Ava rattled off numbers from memory. She'd studied this road the night before. A round cracked a fist-sized chip off the stone above her. She flinched, then forced her shoulders down. Her world narrowed to tasks. Seal. Pack. Tape. Reassess. She slid to the next body, breathing shallow, chest sticky. Needle decompression kit in hand, she found the landmark space and drove the needle in. A hiss. The chest rose easier. "You're okay. Keep breathing." She moved again. Someone screamed behind the second truck. Bennett crawled toward the sound without being told. Good. Give him a job and he'd move. The enemy tried to push it. Fire walked down the road in a rhythm that said they were shifting to flank from the left ridge. Ava pictured the map in her head: dry streambed, boulder pile, the goat path that cut back into the blind zone. Heller, left ridge creep. Break it. He shifted again, shot in quick strings, and forced heads down. 2 rounds came back, sloppy. Pressure easing. Not enough. Mercer's eyes found hers through the smoke. Pain made his voice small. Mitchell, you're running the line. She didn't answer. She was already making triage calls on the net. Read to me. Ambulatory to the rear of the second truck. Heller anchors right. Bennett, you're my hands. Count tourniquets. The words put a frame around chaos. People moved because the words were simple. She swapped gloves with a rip and kept going. She felt the valley's edges pressing in, felt the seconds fatten. She refused to rush the wrong thing. She finished a wrap, checked the seal on Mercer again, and looked up the high side. The notch glittered, a scope flare or sunlight on metal. Either way, it meant the next shot would be smarter than the last one. Ava flattened. Sniper, notch. Heller's reply came like a promise. On it. He poured fire into the cut until rock spit and the glint went dead. Mitchell, we can't sit, he shouted. I know, she said. She scanned for a way to bend the kill box open. If they could reach the streambed, they could climb the far bank and take the shelf from the side. But crossing meant exposing 5 seconds of body to the notch and the wall gun. 5 seconds was a life. Bennett, she said, prep litters. We move on my mark. Smoke again on 3. He swallowed and nodded. Mercer tried to push up. She shoved him back with a palm. You stay breathing. That's your job. He managed a crooked grin that was more grit than humor. The radio hissed. Grace again. Mitchell, 2 mics out if you can mark. I'll ride the rotor wash into you. Ava looked at the sky she couldn't see and the ridge she could. 2 minutes could be forever or just enough. She wiped sweat and grit from her eyes with the back of her wrist and listened to her own breath steady. 3, she said to Bennett. 2. She drew a deep breath and felt the road waiting to bite again. 1. Bennett pops smoke and the canisters spit gray that blooms into a moving wall. Ava rises with it, grabs Mercer's carrier strap, and drives him toward the thicker curl of cover. Heller leans into the trigger, short braced bursts that stitch the notch and keep heads down. Rounds snap through the edge of the smoke, hot grit peppers Ava's neck. She doesn't look up. Left. Down, she barks, and Bennett is already sliding litters into the gap. They ferry the first red across the road's crown, feet first, low as snakes. 5 seconds of exposure feels like a minute stretched until it might tear. They make it. The blast-scored asphalt behind them spits chips. Ava plants Mercer behind a tire carcass and rechecks the vent seal. Sticky, but holding. Stay tall enough to breathe, low enough to live, she says. He catches her wrist for half a beat, a squeeze that says copy without words. She pulls free and goes again. The second casualty is limp, eyes glassy. She pinches hard at the trap muscle, he flinches and tries to talk. Don't, she says. Save it for later. She packs gauze into a wound track, changes angles when the bleed pushes back, and keeps packing until the ooze becomes a throb. Tape. Wrap. Move. The valley tries a new trick. Fire walks from the notch to the shelf and then drops low toward the dry streambed, the goat path gambit she mapped in her head. Heller, drag fire right, then cut left on my count, she calls. Now. He rakes the right, switches left, and buys them air. Bennett throws the last smoke and chokes a cough back down. Out, he says, voice small in the net. Copy, Ava answers, and feels decision weight press the space between her shoulder blades. Grace cuts in. Mitchell, I'm at 2 minutes, bringing dust. I need eyes on LZ. Ava peeks through the thinning screen. The only flat ground within sprint is the dry bed itself, choked with stones and a tangle of brush. Too tight for a full set down, barely wide enough for a toe in if a pilot is stubborn. Grace is stubborn. Marking green, Ava says. She tears a chem light, cracks it, and hurls it into the streambed. It lands short. She curses, crawls out, grabs it, and throws again, farther this time. The ridge barks, a round snaps the air where her hand was. She flattens instinctively, then slides back, heartbeat hammering her palate. Mercer's M4 lies by his knee where he dropped it when he went down. The rifle is a line she doesn't cross without need. She stares at it for half a breath and hears training argue with reality. Need is here. She slings her med pack tighter, picks up the rifle, checks chamber, and takes a knee behind the rim of stone. Short bursts, no spray, she tells herself, the same way she counts gauze. She lays a controlled string into the shelf to pin the shooter long enough for Bennett to drag the litter past the cut. The difference isn't the noise, it's the way her fire shapes the space, carves them a corridor. She hates that it works and uses it anyway. Mitchell, 30 seconds, Grace says. The wash of rotor beats the valley into a vibrating bowl. Dust rises like it was waiting for the excuse. Ava needs to move the wounded to the streambed's lip and keep the enemy blind at the same time. Bennett, anchor on me, she says. We're going in 2 pushes. Heller, cut the notch when I say break. She leans, fires, leans out, signals with 2 fingers. They lift the first litter. Weight finds her hips, the strap digs. She keeps it close, low, 1 knee at a time, teeth clenched against a grunt that would be wasted air. Halfway, the smoke thins to gauze and the bullets get curious. Break, she calls. Heller answers with a string that bites rock and makes the ridge spit chips. They make the lip and dump into the shallow cut of the bed. The Black Hawk knifes over the ridge and shoulders the air aside. Rotor wash kicks a hurricane of grit and trash across the bend. Ava feels it shove at her chest and use it. She flags the crew chief with the panel she tore from a VS-17 and points at Mercer first. The crew chief throws a thumb and a hook arcs down on a line. They clip Mercer fast, the line lifts and he rises a few jittering feet, swinging, then steadies. Ava hates watching it, hates not touching the litter until the crew drags him in. She makes herself look away because there are more breaths on the ground than in the air. The enemy adjusts to the new math. They stop wasting rounds at the bird's armored belly and start hunting the open bodies at the edges. 2 cracks thump the road by Ava's boots. She shifts without thinking, draws sight again, and taps 2 into the dark mouth above the notch. Not to win. To buy seconds. Every second buys a life. She hears herself say it and believes it, seconds are lives. Bennett hears it too, and his hands, which were shaking when this started, find a rhythm. Litter's clear, he says, voice stronger. Next red, Ava replies. Heller grunts and drops behind a rock. I'm good, he lies. Blood stripes his sleeve. She slams a pressure dressing on him with a glare that binds better than tape. You're good when I say, she snaps, then softens it. Stay in the fight. He nods, ashamed and grateful at once, and leans back into his rifle. Grace calls, 1 more pass. The bird circles, low and ugly, and Ava judges the angle like she's setting a bone. She needs 1 more patient up and out, and she needs to not die getting him there. The streambed is a trough of cover that turns to a gutter where it widens. That gutter is a funnel if someone on the wall looks down at the wrong time. She watches the wall instead of the bird. The wall blinks, a shard of lens, a flicker of wrong light, and she fires into it before it grows teeth. The blink goes away. Now, she says, and they run the last litter to the hook. The line takes weight and the litter rises. Ava feels the sudden lightness of when a decision is made and can't be unmade. It is not relief. It's the next duty rushing in. The smoke is gone. The dust is everywhere. The ridge still has people on it. Her pack is lighter by 3 tourniquets and half her gauze and 1 chest seal she wished she still had. She reloads, breathes, and tastes metal in the back of her throat. Mitchell, Mercer crackles from the cabin, thin and angry at being useless. Hold it together down there. She lets herself answer him this time. We're holding, she says, and means it as a promise and an order. The bird banks and roars away with its burden. The valley inhales to take its shot at what's left. Ava rolls her shoulders, sets her boots, and looks at Heller and Bennett. We're not done, she says. We're going to open this box. She points at the far bank of the streambed, a ragged slope that leads to a seam in the rock. We take that seam, we cut their shell from the side. Heller checks his mag. Bennett swallows, then nods. On your word, he says. Ava counts again, the only ritual she trusts. 3. 2. She feels the fight shift its weight. 1. And they move. Ava launches first, boots digging into loose rock, rifle tight to her shoulder, med pack locked high so it doesn't swing. Heller rises into a half crouch, hosing the shelf with short bursts that press heads down without wasting rounds. Bennett is on the litter drag harness even though there's no litter left to carry, he just needs his hands on something steady while he runs. They angle along the streambed, then cut up the ragged slope toward the seam in the rock, the one Ava marked in her head when the day was quiet. The climb is ugly. Gravel slides. Knees bark. A round snaps past Ava's ear and chips stone into her cheek. She doesn't look at the blood, she checks her front sight, breathes, moves. 2 more, she says, 2 more body lengths to the seam, and they hit it, a shallow crease that eats their silhouettes and gives them a path along the wall. From here the shelf that has been pinning them sits off their right shoulder, high and close. The angle is bad for the shooter and good for them. That's the point. Hold, Ava whispers. She peeks. The shelf is a low spine with a dish of scraped rock behind it. Sandbags. A firing mat. The glint she killed earlier is a dead scope on a rifle, but there's movement lower, another shooter tucked into a slot with a better lane on the road. He's patient. He's waiting for the bird to come back or for someone to bolt. Ava marks him with mind's ink and pulls back. Bennett, you keep eyes on that slot. If he moves, you say. No shots unless I say. Bennett nods, jaw locked so tight it quivers. Heller leans past Ava, counting holes in the rock with his eyes. We go loud or quiet, he asks. We go right, Ava says. Short. Clean. She slides forward on elbows, keeps her profile glued to stone, and feels the seam tug sand across her sleeves. 10 feet. 8. 5. She can hear the shooter's breath now, quick through a mask, the way stress makes a metronome when men try to be still. She edges to the lip, brings the rifle up only as high as it needs, and touches the trigger once. The slot goes still. No speech about it. No victory shout. She is already shifting to the dish because shooting makes noise and noise draws answers. An answer comes fast. A second man pops from the dish with a rifle on full auto, panic hammering at the seam. Chips spit. Ava's world shrinks to sight and push. She takes 2 controlled presses and the man drops back into the dish. Heller steps into the seam and adds a burst that chews the sandbag line, then stops because restraint is what keeps them alive. Bennett calls, left slope, and Ava snaps her head that way, 2 heads on the far shoulder, trying to angle down into the bed. She points and Heller rakes them off the lip. Set, Ava says. We own the shelf. The words change the map. Fire from below dies by half in the first breath that follows. The enemy on the wall doesn't like being looked down on. That's human. Ava doesn't waste it. Push along, she says, and they crawl the shelf, clearing pockets, finding a scatter of brass and an empty RPG tube that makes the back of her neck go cold with the thought of what could have been if grace or timing had been different. Radio chatter claws through the noise. Grace, Mitchell, I have to hold off, dust is a mess. I can orbit. Say your status. Ava keys without lifting her cheek from the stock. We're on the shelf. 2 down here. Roadside guns reduced. She looks at Heller. He looks back and nods. Copy. I'll call a gun run if you need a nudge, Grace says, and Ava pictures the maps and the civilians that hide in rock and shadow and says, negative for now. Below, the convoy finds its spine again. With the shelf quiet, soldiers pull wounded into better cover and reseat behind engine blocks. Someone starts a calm count for ammo and water, the kind of voice that keeps people from listening to fear. Ava takes the moment to breathe and check her pack. She's down a chest seal, 3 tourniquets, 2 pressure dressings, 1 needle. She has enough for now. She always wants more. Movement. A flash of cloth near a goat path that cuts behind the shelf, the kind of flank that turns a win into a trap if you let it. Bennett, on me, she says, and they crab crawl to a notch that looks nowhere from below but everywhere from here. A teenager's face appears for half a heartbeat, too young to hold the rifle he holds. He sees them, freezes, and Ava's mind splits between threat and the kind of mercy that gets people killed. The boy shifts to lift the rifle. Heller's hand lands on Ava's shoulder, this is his shot to take, and he fires a single round that takes the weapon from the boy's hands and puts him on his back gasping, alive, scared, and out of the fight. It is not perfect. It is better than the other option. Stay down, Heller growls, a human order in a place that has spent hours trying to unteach it. The valley pushes back one more time, hard. From the far ridge, a machine gun opens with a slow, heavy rhythm that walks across the road and tries to rake the shelf. The angles are bad for it, but bad angles still kill if you give them time. Ava flattens, crawls to a crack that looks out and down, and finds the gun on a tripod, crew of 2, a third feeding belt. She can't fix that at this distance with the rifle she has. She can fix something else. Grace, I need a slap on far ridge, machine gun on the terrace with 3 in the crew. Marking with smoke. She pops a green and rolls it from the shelf's lip so the cloud rises where the wind will carry it just enough to mean, not enough to lie. Got it, Grace says. 1 pass, guns only. The Black Hawk's minigun speaks like a zipper ripping the valley's fabric. The terrace jumps, earth spits, and the heavy rhythm dies mid-stride. Silence doesn't come back, battle never gives you that for free, but the shape of the sound changes. Ava lets her shoulders fall a half-inch. Heller breathes a word that might be thanks and might be a curse. Down the bend, Bennett says, pointing with his chin. Across the road, 2 insurgents drag something toward the notch, an angle iron, a chain, a small box that looks like it wants to be a problem. Not today, Ava says. She lines the front sight on the one with the chain, presses. Heller takes the second. The box clatters harmlessly, and dust eats it. On the convoy net, someone starts calling clear sectors, right, high, left, rear, and the answers come back strong. Ava keeps her cheek on the stock and her eyes on the places where trouble lives when it's hurt, the shadows, the gullies, the stubborn corners. The minutes lengthen and thin like rubber pulled just short of breaking. They don't break. Mercer's voice returns, rough but steady from the bird's cabin on a relay. Mitchell, status. She gives it to him clean. Shelf secure. Casualties evac'd. Remaining elements consolidating. Enemy disrupted. He snorts a laugh that ends in a wince. Figures, he says. You say it like you're reading a checklist. I am, she says. It's how we don't die. They hold 5 more minutes because 5 is the number Ava trusts when the math is in doubt. In that 5, nothing smart moves on the ridges. The wind comes back to the valley, and with it the small noises, the tick of cooling metal, the whisper of grit. Ava feels the shift that means the fight is passing from chaos to control. She doesn't stand into it. She stays low and counts her remaining dressings with a thumb and forefinger because the next call could be a bleed, and medicine is the part of her that has to be ready when the rifle goes quiet. When she finally speaks, it's to the line that's waited on her voice since the first blast. We're coming down, she says. We're going to walk you out of this. And then she adds it, not loud, not for anyone but the men close enough to hear and the valley that has tried to swallow them. We're still here, she says, and the words settle the way good weight settles on a stretcher, secure, no wobble. Ava backs off the shelf first, keeping the muzzle forward and her shoulders tucked. Heller steps down after her, scanning the seam they climbed. Bennett checks their 6, head on a swivel, lips pressed thin. The road looks different from above than below, same scars, new angles. Down among the trucks, shapes move with a purpose that wasn't there an hour ago. People who were hunched small behind tires are up on a knee, rifles out, eyes clear. The line has its bones again. Ava drops into the streambed and feels the ache in her thighs catch up. She lets it pass and points Bennett to the right flank while she crosses to the worst of the wounded still staged in the shallow. First casualty, breathing steady, color better, pressure dressing holding. She checks cap refill, checks distal pulse, checks the seal, and moves. Second, needle sight clean, chest rise even now. She hears the small wheeze and times it, slower than before, good. She slides a hand under the litter rail and braces as 2 soldiers lift. Careful with the turn, she says, and they are. Heller stands watch near the bend, face streaked with a thin line of dried blood where rock kissed him hard. Left high is quiet, he reports. Right is quiet enough. That's the kind of report Ava likes. Truth with edges. She nods and keys the net. FOB Hawthorne, this is Mitchell. Contact reduced, immediate evac complete, remaining casualties stable for ground. Request convoy recovery and route security, same grid. The reply comes from a calm voice she knows from midnight radios and dry humor. Mitchell, Hawthorne copies. QRF rolling. ETA 20. 20 minutes sounds both long and manageable. It's a window she can fill with checks and with making the road safer to leave. She drags a casualty collection point a few yards deeper into the cut, then gets people refilling water and counting magazines. Bennett appears with a bundle of torn shirts and the shy look of someone who solved a problem without being asked. Clean cloth, ma'am, he says. She doesn't correct the title, he needs it more than she needs accuracy. Good, she says. Use them for padding, not pressure. Mercer's voice crackles in on a relay from the bird now circling wider. He sounds stronger, or maybe it's just the cabin air and the pain meds. Mitchell, sitrep. She gives it to him straight. Shelf clear. Road passable once QRF arrives. Casualties stabilized. Ammo at 60% across the line. He exhales and it comes through as a hiss. Copy. You're calling the walk. She doesn't say thank you. There will be time for that later, and not on a net everyone is leaning into. The valley tests their nerves with 2 more distant shots that hit nothing. Nobody flinches hard. That's how Ava knows the worst is truly past. She looks up into the bright, bleached sky and then down at her hands, the glove tips gritted with dust and dried blood. She swaps them out for a fresh pair because clean isn't just sterile, it's a mental reset. Hydrate, she tells Bennett. Small sips. He obeys like the order is a rope. Grace comes back on the air, voice easy now that the rotors aren't chewing the same piece of sky. Mitchell, I'm pushed to fuel. I'll be back if you need me. Ava can hear the unspoken "you'll be fine." "We're good," she says. "Thanks for the slap." Grace's laugh is a quick click. "Anytime." QRF calls in from the mouth of the valley, engines deeper and heavier. When the lead MATV appears, dust coats its fenders like frost. The team leader climbs out, takes one long look, and then looks at Ava, not because of rank but because of gravity. "You're Mitchell," he says. "What do you need?" She points. "Block left high with your gun. Put a team on the goat path. We're going to roll the wounded and then peel by chalks to the highway." He nods and sends people moving before he's fully finished turning. They load the remaining casualties with the kind of care that looks slow but isn't. Straps crossed, heads padded, lines checked so nothing snags on a tailgate. Ava walks each litter like it's the only one, palms light on rails until the last boot clears the bumper. She steps back and feels the space that opens when immediate work shifts to the next circle out. She gathers the survivors by the rear of the second truck. "Listen up," she says, voice level. "We're leaving the way we live, straight, steady, no rush. Sectors stay covered. Nobody plays hero on the last 100 yards." Heller's mouth quirks. Bennett's shoulders square. A couple of the younger soldiers look at her like she's the sound of a door closing on a storm. They move. The column rolls through the bend that tried to bite them. From this angle you can see the scorch on the rock like a bruise. Ava keeps her rifle up and her head on the swivel, but part of her mind is already back at the FOB, in the tent with the whiteboard where she'll write names and times and what worked and what didn't. She's already counting the things she used and the things she'll restock before sleep. Sleep is a word, not a plan. The highway appears like a sane thought, straight and clean compared to the valley's curves. Tires hit it with a sound that makes everyone exhale at once. The convoy pushes the last stretch with doors sealed and windows streaked. The gate at FOB Hawthorne swings open, guards already waving them in. The first thing that hits is the smell: diesel, dust, warm canvas, coffee that's been sitting too long. It smells like control. Ava hops down before the truck fully stops and guides the litters straight to the medical tent. Inside is bright and crowded, the way it gets when chaos is being turned back into charts. She hands off clean, gives the quick histories, points to the vent seal on Mercer's chart and says, "Watch this for burp," then steps out because the next patients are inbound and her work shifts shape again. She drinks 2 inches of water and stares at the bottle like it might tell her why her hands won't stop wanting to move. Bennett finds her by the flap, helmet off now, hair stuck to his forehead. He looks like he wants to say something big and complicated. He settles on this: "We didn't break." She nods. "That's the job." Heller leans on a pole and gives her a look that isn't quite a smile. "You ran it," he says. "We followed." She shrugs half a shoulder. "Everyone did their part." He grunts. "Sure. But you ran it." Later, there's a room with a fan that doesn't do much and a circle of folding chairs. The debrief is calm, factual. They map the ambush, mark the shooter positions, the path to the seam, the points where radio calls mattered. Ava speaks when asked, hands still on her knees so they don't start making shapes in the air. She doesn't use large words for small things. "We saw the glint late. We should have thrown a feeler drone. I'll push for 2 more chest seals in every bag." Bennett moves better with tasks, assign him early. Heller takes hits and stays in, swap his plate before the next patrol. Heads nod. Notes scratch. Someone writes, "Mitchell, recommendation pending," on a corner of the whiteboard and circles it. She pretends not to see it because it isn't why she's here. When they cut them loose, the sun is lower, a mean orange rolling off the HESCO barriers. Ava steps to the edge of the motor pool and looks back toward the valley. It looks like distance, but she can still hear the zipper bark of the minigun in her memory and feel the way a litter's weight sits uneven when one handle is shorter than the others. She rolls her shoulders and the ache is still there, and it will be tomorrow, and that is fine. She inventories her bag by touch in the quiet, 2 tourniquets left, 1 pressure dressing, no seals. She zips it and parks the pull where it always goes. A medic from another platoon stops and asks softly, "You good?" Ava answers the only way that feels honest. "I will be." She turns toward the tent again. There are charts to check, supplies to sign for, and a list to make. The valley will keep its secrets. They will keep each other. And when the next road asks the same questions, she'll answer the same way, with steady hands, clear words, and a plan that holds. Ava did what she always does the next day: restock, recheck, and return to the tent before the sun burned the dust white. The valley was quiet for now, the routine was not. She rebuilt the med pack in the same order, logged used supplies, and wrote a clean after-action note that fit on 1 page because people read 1 page. Mercer called in from the ward with a voice that sounded more like him. "Quit hovering by those shelves and come look at the scar you saved," he said. She went, checked his seal sight and vitals, told him when to breathe deeper, and ignored the nurse's smile when the captain tried to scold her for taking the rifle. "I picked it up because I had to," she said. "Then I put it down." That was the end of it for her. The platoon settled back into its hard rhythm. Heller swapped his cracked plate, then walked a short patrol and came back with dust up to his calves and a line of sweat salt on his collar. "Plates hold," he grunted. "Copy," Ava said. Bennett asked for task lists before briefs now. He carried extra tourniquets because it made his hands feel ready. Grace dropped by with coffee that tasted like metal and a quick grin. "You owe me paint for my bird," she said. "You owe me more smoke," Ava answered. They clinked paper cups and called it even. Word spread the way it does on bases, sideways first, then up. The whiteboard note that someone had circled in the debrief turned into emails and signatures, and then into orders cut from someplace colder than the desert. 2 weeks later, a transport turned west. The wounded flew ahead. The rest of the unit rotated on schedule. The flight to the States felt longer than the war and quiet in a different way, the kind of quiet that makes you think too much. Ava dozed in a seat that didn't recline, med pack under her boots out of habit. Fort Carson was bright and clean and smelled like pine and floor wax. Parade field grass was trimmed to regulation. Mountains stood behind the buildings like a painting that didn't change. They lined up by chalks, not by what they'd done. Mercer walked out on his own power, thinner, stubborn, chest taped under his dress shirt. Bennett's hands shook only when nobody was looking. Heller looked the same as always, which meant a little older. Grace was there in a flight suit that made everyone move a little faster when she passed. The ceremony was straight to the point. Names, citations, short remarks. When they called Ava, she came forward because that's what you do when your name is spoken into a microphone. Bronze Star with V device, the officer read, and a list of actions that sounded fancier out loud than they had felt in the dirt: stabilized casualties under fire, coordinated defense while providing care, directed movement to evacuation, engaged enemy positions to preserve the force. Mercer pinned the medal with fingers that still hurt, eyes bright from something that wasn't pain. "You kept me breathing," he murmured. "You kept all of us breathing," Heller added under his breath from the line behind. Bennett didn't say anything until later, when the crowd thinned. Then he blurted, "When you said seconds are lives, it stuck." She nodded. "Because it's true." There were photos that would go on walls. There were hands to shake and a press release that used the word hero in a way that made Ava want to be back at a table with a checklist instead. She let people talk and then found a small office and a dry erase board. She wrote 3 bullets, more chest seals per bag. Pre-brief seam routes on choke points. Assigned taskers to keep young soldiers moving. Mercer wandered in with a cane he didn't need yet. "You can stop for 1 day," he said. "Not if we're going to be better on the next one," she answered. He smiled without arguing, which in his language was a yes. Weeks turned into training blocks. She taught a med lane under shade cloth while Colorado wind whispered past the stakes. New soldiers ran to her voice as if it were a line to hold on to. She made them pack and unpack their kits until they could do it blind. She walked them through blast fronts and needle sights and the moment when you're going to want to freeze but can't. She didn't tell a war story to make herself bigger. She used examples to make the steps stick. If you don't know what to do, she said, do the next right thing. Bleeding, airway, breathing, move. Say it out loud. It keeps your head where your hands are. Every so often the phone on her desk hummed with a name from far away. Grace checking in from another flight line. Heller sending a photo of a plate that took a hit and didn't quit. Bennett forwarding a training schedule with the note, I gave your list to the LT, he liked it. Mercer sent exactly one message that said, cleared to run. Don't tell the doc. She told the doc anyway and laughed when he accused her of betrayal. They were fine. That word was doing more work than usual, but it was the right word. On a cool morning, they gathered at the Memorial Grove on post. Not a big thing, no speeches, just names read quiet and a minute of still. Ava stood at the back and listened. When the list ended, she touched the edge of her pack where it hung on her shoulder even in dress uniform. Habit. Wait. The reminder that what you carry matters most when nobody sees it. Afterward, a young medic she hadn't met before jogged up, breathless. Sergeant Mitchell. They said you'd look at my loadout. Ava took the bag, dumped it on a bench, and pointed. Move your tourniquets high left. Gauze stacks here. Label your needle kit. Tape on a carabiner so you can tear with one hand. The kid tracked every word. Thanks, Sergeant, he said, eyes bright the way brand new eyes get. Don't thank me, she said. Just do it fast when it counts. That afternoon she ran the loop near the motor pool, steady pace, mountain air in her lungs. The base PA called a training announcement, then a weather check, then nothing. Quiet again, this time the good kind. She thought about the valley and the shelf and the seam in the rock and how plans are just maps for when reality starts arguing. She thought about seconds and lives and how simple rules beat fancy ones when everything tilts. When she reached the end of the loop, Mercer was there on the curb, cane across his knees, grin crooked. Figure you'd end where you started, he said. It's a loop, she answered. He nodded toward the parade field where the wind pushed lines in the grass. They're going to teach your day for a long time. Ava shook her head. They'll teach what works. That's enough. Evening rolled in cold and clean. The mountains turned the color of steel. Lights clicked on one by one across the post. Ava headed for the tent, because there were forms to sign and a shipment to check and a class in the morning that needed a better dummy airway. She didn't think about legend or labels or what people whispered in halls. She thought about the next right thing, the way she always did. In Nuristan, dust would lift again on a road that curled between steep slopes. Somewhere a patrol would see a glint and feel the quiet press the skin. When that happened, someone would breathe, count 1, 2, 3, and move exactly far enough to make a life longer. That would be the work. That would be the answer. And when anyone asked later what made the difference, they'd get the truth the simple way, steady hands, clear words, and a plan that holds.